Hey there, welcome back to Badass Messaging. We're still in Module 2, Shifting Beliefs. And here in Lesson 3, we're talking about mistakes and mistaken beliefs. How do you identify them? How do you go about figuring out, what beliefs you need to shift that your audience has? So that's what we're going to be talking about. But before we get to that, here's the truth bomb. People don't recognize their beliefs. So you're going to have to start by finding the symptoms of those beliefs rather than just constantly talking about beliefs. And you're probably not even going to be able to identify the beliefs up front. You're going to have to start with the symptoms, and that's how you'll go about identifying the mistaken beliefs. So specifically in this lesson, we're going to talk about why you need to start by looking for the mistakes, the behavior, not the beliefs, and then how to identify the mistaken beliefs once you've found kind of the actions, the mistaken actions they're taking. So let's dive in. You're going to start by looking for the mistaken actions. Now, remember from last lesson that I said ultimately you want to shift beliefs and not focus exclusively on actions. If you're just talking about actions, you're not going to make much progress. But there's a problem. The problem is that people generally aren't aware of their beliefs, and they definitely don't recognize that their beliefs are the problems. Like, people aren't walking around saying, I'm making this mistake, and it's because I hold this belief, and that belief is wrong. That's just not how we operate. Now, it is those subconscious beliefs that cause us to do things wrong, but we're not consciously aware of them. And so that's the problem. So because your audience doesn't recognize that the problem is like a belief that's wrong, talking just about beliefs isn't likely to do much good. So again, if you just talk beliefs, that's not going to work. So instead of focusing initially on beliefs, you have to start by identifying their mistaken actions. And again, I'm going to give you this caveat, separate from everything else. This is the process for you to figure out what the beliefs are, because you can't get inside your audience's head. The best you can do is deduce beliefs by identifying the mistaken actions. So you're starting by identifying the symptoms, not the cause, because that's what your audience will recognize, but also what you would recognize. Again, if you think about it, doctors don't, just look at you and randomly say, well, you have this disease. No, I mean, they ask, well, what are the symptoms? And they reach conclusions. They decide what tests to run. They do all of that based upon the symptoms, the outward signs of whatever's wrong with you. It's the same thing here. You have to look for the symptoms, and that's what's going to help you to kind of do this work. So what you need to be asking is this: what are your audience's outward mistakes? You have to be identifying these. And when I use the term or the phrase outward mistakes, what I mean here is these are things that you don't have to talk about what is happening inside of someone's brain. So it's not something they think. It's not something they believe. It's none of that. It's like literally you as an outside third-party observer can see them doing the things. In the example that I used, and that I'll kind of use throughout this module repeatedly, of people having a belief that there's one right strategy, so they hop from strategy to strategy. Here, the outward mistake is going from strategy to strategy. Like me sitting here on the outside, I can see this person tried that strategy and then stopped, and then tried strategy 2 and stopped, and then tried strategy 3 and stopped. And it's kind of bouncing from one to the next. So those are things I don't have to know what's going on in their head. I don't have to, try to decide what's happening in their head at this point. I can simply look and see them doing the behavior. That's what you're looking for on this first step. So what are those outward mistakes that your audience is making? And it's not just one. You'll notice it says mistakes, plural. You'll want to identify as many mistakes as you can that your audience is making. You should be able to come up with a long list. So now you can pause this lesson here to do the work or wait till after you're done. I don't really care, but the concept is you want to brain dump every single thing you can identify as of a mistake that people in your audience are making, and they're being made repeatedly. And these are things obviously related to how you help, what you do, etc. But I want you to kind of go through this and find the mistakes and work at it. Keep going until it's really hard to think of others. I don't want you to just scratch the surface. I want you to go deep, because the more you identify, the better position you're going to be to find the right message. So if you want to pause right now, this is a good time to do this. Otherwise, you can do it when we're done. But Create a list identifying as many mistakes as you can that your audience is making. Now, once that you've identified the mistakes, the next step is to identify kind of the beliefs that are causing the actions. And what you do is you use the actions, you use the mistakes, the outward mistakes, to figure out what the mistaken beliefs are. So again, it's kind of once you've identified the mistake, find the beliefs behind them. That's the process from here. And here's a note I want you to get. Normally, a single mistaken belief will lead to multiple mistaken behaviors. So what you're doing is you're kind of looking for like, well, here are these 3 different beliefs and they all seem to have something in common. Let me try to think through, what do these things have in common? You're looking for those common threads. This is how you kind of find what the beliefs are. And let me give you some examples of kind of from that, the idea that a lot of entrepreneurs have that there's one right strategy to build a belief and they just need to find that one right strategy to build a business and they just have to find it. So here are some of the outward mistakes that come from that belief. We've already talked about strategy hopping, going from plan to plan to plan, just saying, well, I've just got to find the right strategy and this isn't it. So let me throw that one out and find a new one, right? That's what they're doing. Another thing they do is they ignore the broader work. Instead of focusing on everything in their business, they get so fixated on the individual trees of an individual strategy that that's what they're doing and ignoring the broader work of building a business, right? So that's another mistake that people are making that I would say comes from this belief that there's one right strategy and they just have to find it. So once they get fixated on a strategy, they just focus exclusively on that stuff. So that's another mistake that comes from this belief. And then a third one is they're looking for a playbook, right? They want someone to tell them, do precisely this, exactly how I did it, and that's all you have to do to build a successful business. And what I would say is there are no businesses that were built exactly the same way. I mean, outside of building a franchise and literally, buying a franchise, which we don't do in the online space, that's not how business works. And so, but I see so many people looking for that. And to me, when I look at that, that's coming from this notion that there is one right way. There's one right strategy. And I can simply say, well, what did this mentor do? And I will literally do exactly what they did in exactly the way they did it. And that will lead to my success. And so that's what they're looking for. To me, again, that's all 3 of these are coming from that one mistaken belief that what you need to do is find one strategy to build your business. And so that's kind of an example of how you can start to see common threads. So the process you're going to use is to list all the mistakes you identified back earlier in this lesson, group them into related problems, and then look for common beliefs that cause each group. So if you say, well, these 3 look similar, then you do the work of saying, okay, what is a belief that would cause all of these problems, cause all of these mistakes? So that's the process you're going to go through. Group things in related mistakes, and then, do your work of saying, okay, what are the beliefs? Now, there will be some mistakes that, some beliefs that you've only identified one mistake related to it. That's going to happen, and that's okay. But if you find related things, that's going to be something that helps you kind of deduce what the mistaken belief is, because it gives you a lot of clues about what is it in their mindset that's really happening. So that's the process. Now, here's the other thing I want you to do. Once you've done this work, and let me step back to say this, you're going to have to try this on. See if it works, see if it makes sense. And there are going to be times you try out and you think for a while that's the mistaken belief, but then you step back and after a while and say, no, that wasn't it. And that's okay. This messaging is always something you're iterating and getting better at, but I want you to do the work of identifying a belief behind each one of the mistakes. Now, once you identify the mistaken belief, think if you can come up with other mistaken behaviors that it causes. So this is what makes it great, is once you find the belief, oftentimes it will help you to kind of say, oh yeah, and then people also do this. Oh, and they also do that. Oh, and they also do that. So it kind of gives you a broader sense so you can come up with more mistakes that people are making. And the more that you can come up with, the better. And again, it'll also confirm your conclusion that that's the belief that's behind it. Because when you find a lot of different mistakes related to it, you're like, oh, yep, they are doing this. And so it helps to kind of make you or give you confidence that you've found the right thing. So that's the process after you've identified the belief. So the kind of key point here is that because beliefs aren't on the surface, we start by finding the mistaken behavior and then diagnose the beliefs from the behavior. So start identifying the mistakes that are holding your audience back. Again, if you didn't kind of pause this lesson when we were there right before we moved to point 2, now's the time. I want you to create that list, come up with the list of all of the different mistakes that you can think of, and then come up with the beliefs behind them. Up next in the next lesson, you'll discover how to crystallize the mistakes and where your audience should be. In other words, what are they thinking? What should they be thinking with what we call belief statements? So that's what we'll cover in the next lesson. I'll see you there.